it's hard because I've started to think about like, do we need to make a trade at some point? Like, should we be thinking about those things? And I just like when it comes to someone like Isaac, I start to wonder what his role is, but I don't know who would want to trade for him at this point, like where we would find, the match in that situation just with the way he's been playing so far. So it's a struggle to find what the right answer is between that and just getting guys more minutes when we don't even have everyone healthy either.
It's been a long week. It's been a long week for Cavs fans,
The
for
long
Cleveland fans in general. The Cavs have continued on this slump. We're trying to figure out how the Cavs can fix their problems, but I think we have to figure out how these problems are arising to begin with. Just real quick, Ab, like what are your thoughts on this whole week so far?
Yeah, it's been weird because I thought after the West Coast trip coming back, it would maybe turn some things around. We would get our footing again. And it hasn't quite happened yet. And it's really hard to point to just one thing because there's been a couple different things that have happened to start the season. Obviously, injuries. There's been a variety of stars out through, this first few weeks of the season. Most recently, Jared Allen out with some type of illness. I don't know if they said anything specifically on him or when he's going to be better, but definitely we're missing him against the Bucks for sure. And then just a slight step back on defense from how we played last season. And part of that could be due to injuries, guys like Jared Allen being out, who is a great defensive player. Obviously, that changes what you can do. But when you're watching all of these teams have like their best 3-point shooting games against us, you start to wonder, like, is everyone having their best game or are we doing something wrong that needs to be corrected? Because everyone can't be going off like that and have it not have to do with us at some point.
And I think that leads to some of the bigger things. But before we get into those problems, let's try to find some joy in this week. Two things I felt like brought Cavs fans joy, or specifically one Cavs fan joy. Lamar Stevens has been getting a lot of minutes. If you follow Av on Twitter, you know that she might be Lamar Stevens' biggest fan. How do you feel like he's done in those minutes? He's been somebody who has been getting a lot of DMPs early in the year. It's nice to see him finally get some minutes. How do you feel like he's done with this opportunity?
Yeah, I feel like he's been playing pretty decent and making the most of those minutes. I was disappointed at the start of the season when it really felt like he was not getting any time at all. I felt like they should have tried to at least sprinkle him in there for a couple of minutes in the rotation. Obviously, with some injuries now and maybe JB just thinking like we need to try something else. He's been giving Lamar a chance. And yes, I am one of Lamar's biggest fans, I would say. A lot of it stems from my dad, actually, who he's said for the last like 2 years at this point, there will be a couple moments where he will say, I think Lamar Stevens is the best player on the court. And I'm like, that might be a slight exaggeration. But, dads, someone said to me one time, dads love their gritty bench players. So I think that's where my dad is at, just enjoying the way that he gives it his all every time he's out there. And I think we're seeing that he goes out there and plays extremely hard, making the most of the time that he's getting. And I would like to see that continue even as guys are healthy, guys come back. Like we still need to be giving him that time out there because I think he brings an intensity that maybe a couple of the other guys are not bringing at this point.
Yeah, and I would love to like get an interview with JB and ask him like, for a couple of guys on this roster, what do you truly like see as their true position, right? Because Lamar Stevens, right, he's getting minutes right now as a 4 with Evan Mobley at the 5. But a lot of people see him as a 3, right? Like, do you see Lamar Stevens as more as a 3? Do you think he can live out there athletically on that wing? Also, the same question I think could be asked for Dean Wade, right? Where do you see those two guys, and where does that put Isaac Okoro in your mind? Because Isaac's he's a 3 more than he's a 2 because he can't really score, but he's definitely like a 3, and I think that's clearly how JB sees him. But with Lamar Stevens and Dean Wade, it's not clear yet where JB really sees their true positions in this rotation. I think that's something that once that gets figured out or clarified, or if it gets figured out and clarified, could be very helpful to this team. I think he plays well when he's out there. Like, he's not a great 3-point shooter, but he's he makes enough of those 3-pointers to where
Yeah.
it's not
He
a
had a nice one
shock.
yesterday, I think.
Yeah, he went 2 or 3,
Yeah.
I think, right? Or one. I think
Yeah. I think
yeah.
there might have been two yesterday, which I mean, that's better than what we've seen from Isaac. So it's like we'll take
Yeah, Isaac
that.
made his first three like a week ago. So in his only three so far, he's like on that Anthony Bennett struggle right now. So he does well there, and what he does really well, and I think your dad, this is probably why he loves him. He is Mr. Gritty, right? Like he gets all the
Yes.
gritty point. He had that one fadeaway jumper from the baseline that was ugly as all
Yes.
get off, but it just went in. Like he just gets those ugly buckets, and he's Mr. Gritty. And it's just nice to see that out there with the second unit. Again, we have to see what Ricky does for this second unit and who JB feels more comfortable putting out there. But Lamar, it didn't make sense to me before why Isaac was, from a pure basketball standpoint, getting more minutes than Lamar. I get from a front office standpoint, he's a number 5
Right.
overall pick. You have to kind of play him. But from a basketball standpoint, I felt like Lamar was giving you much more in the minutes last year than Isaac was, or at least something similar, to where if he's struggling, you would switch him out. And it makes even less sense now because he's at like 8 points a game in these stretches where he's been able to start. Now, Isaac's been playing too, and he hasn't been awful when he gets those extended minutes. The problem is, I think Lamar is more, he's at that point in his career and maturity where he just knows, I'm Lamar Stevens. I'm going to have to do something with these 6 minutes. And that is what it is. I'll get these 2 fouls and be gritty and dive on some balls, but I'm going to be out here for 8 minutes. I don't think Isaac has yet understood that he's only going to be out there for like less than 10 minutes if the team's healthy. And Lamar, he gets to them 10. He'll get you 2 fouls, like no doubt. But he will get you a couple loose balls, a couple rebounds you shouldn't have got, and he makes use of those 10 minutes. And I think that's what makes him.
There's a lot of Yeah, I was just going to say there's a lot of value in like just knowing what your role is on the team. Like we talked about that a few weeks ago with Isaac and how you kind of stated it right there, and we talked about it with Kevin Love and how once he realized what his role was, it was able to elevate him to another level. So I think there's a lot of value in just understanding who you are as a player, what your job is for the team. And it's not to be Donovan Mitchell on every single team, it's different for every player. So I think understanding that is huge. And I think you're right about Lamar. He does know what his job is. And I think we need to get Isaac there in that same place as well.
Yeah, and it's always interesting when you look back at these old drafts, because it'd be like Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum,
Yeah.
Enes Kanter went number 6 in this draft, right? And it's like you have to find the players that are like, okay, there was an element of their career where they were Isaac Okoro, 5th pick of the draft, right? And you're going to give that dude every opportunity to be James Harden or whatever you want him to be for a couple of years. But then there comes a time where you're no longer the 5th pick in the draft and you're just some dude coming off the bench, right? And that's where you either learn to extend your career or you have issues extending your career because you've never figured out how to come off the bench. So that's going to be interesting there. Somebody who's starting to figure things out, or at least, we had all these questions. Oh, Darius Garland, what's wrong with him? Is he regressing? Then he came out and said, calm down, 27-point fourth quarter, 51-point game. I felt like it was so big for DG to have that game just because it felt like less so that people were getting on his back, because that's just going to happen throughout the course of the year, but it felt like he was getting in his own head at times and not being as confident. It was just nice to see him get out there and remember, he's one of the premier scorers in this league. What do you think that 51-point game did for him?
Yeah, I mean, that was so important. Even though we weren't able to get the win, I think, like you said, he needed that for his confidence. It was ridiculous to see how fans were turning on him after just a couple game stretch. Look, it's going to happen. We talked about the injuries he's been dealing with. Like there's a ton of factors out there to maybe as to why he was not playing at his best basketball. But he really needed that. I didn't even know he had it in him to be like that insane of a scorer in the fourth quarter like that. It was next level. I mean, 51 points is nothing to joke about. That is an incredible performance. I think that was almost bigger than getting a win because he really needed to have that game to turn things around, especially with, I think obviously Donovan was out that game. So having him be able to do that and be like, I'm still the guy. This is why I'm on this team. This is why I signed a max deal with them. And remembering that was everything.
Yeah, yeah, and well, I think that's the 27 is the most points scored in a quarter by a Cavalier. I don't know in the postseason, but I think
Wow.
it's like I know it's definitely in the regular season. This is a franchise that had LeBron James.
Yeah.
And what LeBron James had that 25-point overtime. Remember
Right.
that where he scored all the points in what 2006, the year they went to the finals.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, and then he also I like 2018. Brian had like a 25-point quarter in there somewhere, like
He was
multiple
carrying that
times.
team on his back. He was carrying that team.
Yeah, so
Like, we're going to the finals.
yeah, he decided that he wanted to go to the finals, and he did it. So to break a record like that's one of the things that's interesting because we're so used to like in Cleveland talking about like Browns records being broken since expansion, and we've never had a great player like like a great statistical accumulator on the Browns. So it's like it doesn't take much, but for the Cavs, like when you break a Cavs record offensively, that means something because like LeBron played most of his career here, and
Yeah.
he had most of his best years here too. So when you break a record here, that definitely means something. So it's nice to have DG go off. But there have been issues with this Cavs team. I don't want to focus it on one thing, right? I think sports talk in general gets so focused
Yeah.
on what's the one thing we can point at that if we get rid of this, it's going to fix everything. And then, everything will be perfect if they just do the one thing I say to do. I think there are multiple things going on, right? I think it's probably like three big things that pop out to me at least. You can tell me if there's things that pop out to you specifically. Injuries, some of these rotations in the 3-point defense in general, I think have been the biggest problem in this slump. What do you feel like has been like going wrong with this team?
Yeah, I think those three things are really the biggest ones. Obviously, injuries when you don't have an all-star out on the court that you are used to having, that changes what you can do. And I think part of that almost goes into the rotations that we're using. I feel like sometimes we're just limited in what we can do because we're missing key players, and it's hard to figure out who fits together and who you should be using at certain times. So I think that's something we need to work through because injuries are going to continue. This is not going to be, the last point in the season that we have to deal with one of our key players getting injured. So I think that kind of goes into rotations as well. And then, like you said, the 3-point defense, which, we've talked about, it's one of those things where it's continuing to happen where you start to question, like, what are we doing wrong that this is every single team's best night as a 3-point shooting team.
And that's what concerns me the most is the 3-point defense because that was an issue last year,
Yeah.
especially when they started losing a lot. Like I remember Kyle Kuzma had one like an insane game versus the Cavs, and I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that was it. That was my point where I'm like, there's a problem defending the
Yes.
three when Kyle Kuzma makes like 9 threes on you or something ridiculous like that. And I think part of it is like sometimes we're going to talk about like the rotations as far as like the players that they have in there. But I also feel like some of their defensive rotations when they're just like out here trying to rotate defensively, they're a bit aggressive, right? And they get so aggressive and it really starts to show when you don't have both Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, and then you start to run into those rebound issues that they've been running into as well. That these rotations, because you don't have that anchor in Jared Allen and because you're so flexible with Evan Mobley
Right.
going out to the perimeter, you end up in a situation where if a team gets past a certain point, a certain number of passes, they can either exploit that for an open three or get Evan Mobley out of position enough to get him in foul trouble. And I think that's been an issue where like we're rotating and we're so exuberant and energetic on defense that we're almost running into our own issues because some of these
Yeah.
rotations have just been way like there was one where I love when Kevin does it because it shows he's engaged, but I don't like what happens when he does it because I think Isaac was out there on the wing with a guard and Kevin ran up to kind of rotate over and double him. And I was like, why would you do that with Isaac, right? Because if Isaac's out there, He's got to be able
Yeah,
to
let it
handle
go.
that by
Yeah.
himself, right? And what Kevin does is he ends up screening Isaac off of the ball by accident, trying to help him out because he gets there late, and then you leave an open three. So that's one of the things I see like are contributing to 3-point defense. Also, don't think like I don't know. This team's not super long on the perimeter too. Like even when Isaac's out there, he's only with 6'5", and then you have 6'2", and even Donovan's got that 6'8" wingspan. But length on the perimeter, that's really what helps you with those 3-point shots. And boy, were the Milwaukee Bucks abusing it with Brook Lopez,
Oh yeah.
because he was
Too much.
smacking every three. Like every time he shot, I got mad. I was like, "Oh man, here
No.
we go." Because he has that weird form, and the ball hits the net with such velocity that it was just ridiculous.
Yeah. Well,
But
that's one of those things too, where if you lose to the Bucks because like Giannis has an incredible night, you're like, okay, I can live with that. That's the best player in the league. But when you're losing to guys that are not Giannis on this team, it is extremely frustrating for sure.
the Giannis was the third leading scorer. Third leading
I know.
scorer. You did a good job on him. The
Right.
problem wasn't that you can't guard the big. Like the problem was they just kept splashing threes. And some of it I was like, there's no way. Like George Hill went 3 of 6. And me watching George Hill for like 2 years in Cleveland, 3 of 6 is
Yes.
very rare for George Hill. Especially at this
Yes.
point in his career. But like so some of this was just like, okay, they just had a hot night, but some of this is emblematic of some issues that they have. And I think the rotations, like the player packages that they have out there also kind of contributed because sometimes they'll have like all bigs out there because it seems like
Yeah.
we're reacting to one problem without thinking about the next problem that can create. And sometimes he goes, okay, we're getting killed on the boards. Like that was a true thing that was happening against the Milwaukee Bucks. Could not get a rebound. There were like 3 plays
Yep.
where the Milwaukee Bucks got 3 rebounds in 1 possession, right?
Yep.
So obviously you need to do something there without Jared Allen there. So we go to like, okay, we're going to have Kevin Love out there on the wing, and then we're going to put Rolo out there and then have Lamar. And then it just was too many bigs. And now we're
Yes.
getting ran off the 3-point line. And again, it's like we've been complaining about some of these rotation things with JB. We're starting to get to a point where it's like, okay, we need to figure it out, right? Like I understand we're trying to figure stuff out at this early point, but we got to win these games. We're 8-6 now.
Right. Yeah. Some of those Rolo minutes were a little bit frustrating. By the end of it, I was like, we need to get this guy off the court right now. The other one that I always kind of struggle with on like where he should be used is Karis LeVert. I just sometimes when he's out there with both Donovan and Darius, I feel like he's taking away shots from both of them. But at the same time, like I know we're like limited right now and who we can have out there. And he is a great player, so you do want to use him a lot. I just feel like I just don't know where he fits in this team sometimes, and I'm really struggling with it as the season kind of goes on.
Yeah, and with a dude like Karis, it's like the more important of a position you put him in offensively, the more likely it is that you become more frustrated with him, right? Like he
Yeah.
kind of
Mhm.
reminds me of dudes like J.R. Smith, like Ricky Davis is a name from the past where like he used to be one of these guys. If you have him in a limited bench role, I think he's fine. Like nobody complains
Mhm.
about Lou Williams coming off the bench. But when you start starting him and like, hey, we're going to give you 30 minutes and you're going to be on the floor with our other 2 scorers, I feel like you're putting yourself in a position to kind of be let down. And I also feel like we're kind of like taking away air from both of Donovan and
Yeah.
Darius too, where if we could just have a spacer, and I think that's the big thing that they're running into is they don't have a spacer they feel like they fully trust, because even as good as Dean Wade has been early in the year, I don't know if they fully trust it yet. And they clearly don't trust Lamar in that role. So I
Right.
feel like that's the issue is they don't feel like they have a spacer. They feel like Karras, if he's having a good night, can be that spacer and he's fine enough defensively to where they're okay with him out there. But I don't think this is the best role for Karras. And I don't think this is
Yeah.
the best role for the Cavs. You know, I think he's probably best out there on some of these second team rotations where you can have him out there and maybe he's primary ball handler with Jared Allen on the court as well, right? But it's probably, you could have a Coral at the 2, maybe Steven, like you could have spacers and stuff like that out there, so he could be the primary dribble penetrator and have some of that pick and roll action with Jared Allen. But
Yeah,
but
it's hard because I feel like I keep saying like, oh, I don't think this guy should be starting. It's not working. And I'm like, well, at this point, there's no one left to start then. Like it's still truly that 3 role where like, who do we put there? Because it is frustrating that we don't feel like we truly have the right fit at this point still.
Yeah. Now, speaking of some things, I think we're kind of dipping into this territory of what can be fixed, right? Because we're not just going to give you the world is ending on this podcast. We're going to try to give you some things to look forward to. What can fix this? Have you thought of anything you felt like can help this team from just a who's on the floor standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just goes back to how we kicked off the whole discussion with maybe getting some more Lamar minutes. I know it sounds crazy that could like change everything, and I don't think it's going to be this solution that's going to solve it all, but I do think you just saw a big difference. It's hard because I've started to think about like, do we need to make a trade at some point? Like, should we be thinking about those things? And I just like when it comes to someone like Isaac, I start to wonder what his role is, but I don't know who would want to trade for him at this point, like where we would find, the match in that situation just with the way he's been playing so far. So it's a struggle to find what the right answer is between that and just getting guys more minutes when we don't even have everyone healthy either.
Yeah, and one thing I think needs to be thought of is, at least inside the Cavs offices, is how long do we give these internal solutions a chance before we more aggressively start to seek out some trades? Because you don't just have to make trades at the trade deadline, right? That's normally where most of them get done. But if you can make a trade early in the season to kind of course correct, that's going to be helpful because, and I think it's more important for a team like the Cavs that are still developing chemistry, right? Because you don't want to kind of have this thing cooked wrong at the trade deadline and then try to put it back in the oven because you broke something and trying to fix it there, right? If you see the problems arising now, which the main problem is they don't have a true 3-and-D wing that they can trust out there, and that's throwing off all the other rotations, then you need to look at, okay, how can we get one? Like, it's going to be hard. You don't have the trade assets that you had last year because Donovan Mitchell is here, and like we're not getting rid of Donovan Mitchell. So, so you might have to get rid of a player that might be valuable. I'm not saying like Kevin Love or anything like, but maybe a Jetty, maybe a Karras or somebody like that. If you have expirings, there's people who are better at that trade logic when it comes to the NBA than I am. Let me know who you feel like should be on the block. From a pure, we can get things for them, because I know we have a tendency when a player stinks in our sports teams to be like, we should trade them for 2 first-round picks. It's like, we don't even want them on the team. You know what I mean?
No, that's why I said with Isaac, I'm like, I don't even know what we would get for him. It's like, if the guys aren't playing well for you, that's obviously going to decrease the value that you could get for them from anywhere else.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a team that's playing too good right now that's like, I want to get Victor Wembanyama, so let me get worse. You know what I mean? Younger and worse right now.
Let's do another trade with Utah, and we can get some. We can get.
Let's get Lowry back.
That would be ideal. Let's do that.
Yeah, we just need to call. There's no way you're getting Victor right now. You guys have way too many wins, so you guys need to lose. So trade the best player back to us, and we'll give you Isaac, and you can run back to 2019 Cavs again. You know what I mean? Like,
problem solved, and then they can tank and they can do what they got to do. We have other plans right now.
We traded them one too many good players over there by accident. The trade was too good for Utah. We need to course correct. Hey, just give us Laurie back. And we'll send you draft compensation of a 2nd-round pick or something like that. But yeah, it's getting to that point to where it's like, okay, the problems on this team are real, and it's not necessarily, we need to just wait and figure some things out. It's like, okay, no, the wing thing's a problem that definitely needs to get solved. And I feel like the sooner the better with this team that can get that can get solved, that you'll be better off, not just win-loss total, but like in the long run. But it's gonna be interesting to see, because you already don't have the greatest depth in the world with this roster as far as like secondary scorers. You don't want to give up another one to get somebody who's going to be primarily somebody who can just shoot, because the reason Karras is on the team is because we didn't have enough people who can dribble, pass, and shoot. And now you might be in a position to give him up to get somebody who could spot shoot a little bit better. But we'll see what happens here with that. Is there anything else that you see when you watch this team that worries you that a trade could solve?
Well, it was interesting when you were just talking about it right there, because I don't think I realized going into this year how rough our depth is now with the Donovan Mitchell trade. Like, I still think that was the right move to make. I think you needed to go and get someone like him, and that's going to take a lot of assets. But then once you start to look at the bench, you're like, oh, okay, don't have a lot of guys we can throw in here at this point that you really trust in and rely on. So I think the depth has been more of an issue than I really thought. But like I said, I still think that was the right move. I think you had to go and make that move if you wanted, to be a contender at some point in time. And hopefully, I don't think this team is just built for this season. I think they're building for the future too, that you can start to acquire some of those other pieces that are going to round out the depth that we're kind of missing at this point.
Yeah, it's gonna be. Look, Kobe's job ain't done. We thought we for a little bit, that was on the 8-game winning streak. Like, Kobe's job is done. He has to do nothing for the rest of the year. But nope, Kobe has a little bit more work to do,
Yep.
more things to get done. But we'll be here to talk about it. We'll be here to cover it. Make sure you follow Ab on Twitter. Read her stuff on the Sports Illustrated Digest. Also, listen to her podcast anywhere where podcasts are. Apple Music, Spotify. I don't know. You do Stitcher? Like, do people still do Stitcher these days?
Yeah, it's everywhere. All these random sites, it's on there somewhere.
RSS feed if you're super old.
Right.
Wherever they are. Just a Girl from Cleveland podcast, where she covers Ohio State, the Cavs, the Guardians, and the Browns, all of them. So if you want more all-inclusive Cleveland sports or Northeast Ohio sports coverage, make sure you check her out. And always, she will be here on Thursdays doing the CAVS AttacQ podcast. So anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
I don't think so. That's it. We're going to turn things around here. I'm feeling still okay about it. Like, the world isn't over. It's not crumbling. We have some things to fix, but we'll be okay.
We need a 50-point Lamar Stevens game. That's what this city needs. That's what this state needs.
You won't see me back here again. I won't recover.
No, when I was in high school, I was joking around with my baseball coach, right? And it was before the Cavs played the Heat, and this is when LeBron was on the Heat, and we were joking about, oh yeah, man, the Cavs, because the Cavs are terrible. That was like, we were starting like Wayne Ellington and Maurice. We had the Warriors' first bench. Before they became, it was like Maurice Spates, Sean Livingston, Wayne Ellington, all those dudes who ended up becoming like the Warriors bench during the era that terrified us. They were on the Cavs, right? If you don't remember, and they were bad. And the Heat were on like this 27-game crazy win streak. It was called the Heat streak. And I remember I was a big Tristan Thompson guy back then. And I remember telling my baseball coach, I was like, look, man, you don't understand. Tristan Thompson about to have 30 and 40 tonight, man. He about to get these boards and buckets. And I kid you not, Tristan Thompson at least ended that game with 20 points and 20 rebounds. I think he had like 30 rebounds. It was one of them crazy Tristan Thompson nights early in his career. And my coach texted me in the middle of the game, no effing way, dog. Like, because the Cavs were up by like 20. And then LeBron and came back in the end. And they ended up winning the game by like 20.
Whenever I think of Sean Livingston, I think of it was either game 1 or 2 of the 2016 finals, where he like went off. Like, we stopped Steph, we stopped Clay, we stopped Draymond. Mm-hmm. It was like the Sean Livingston game. And I was like, oh my God, this series is going to be awful.
Every time Every time Sean Livingston and Mo Spates would go off, I used to look at the Warriors like, that should be us, dog. That should be us. We should have kept them. I like those teams they had because I remember they would start them and we would not be good, but we would be full of grit when those dudes were out there. And they were out there in Golden State just full of grit out there, out gritting Matthew Dellavedova back then. I was like, oh man, we should have kept them. But yeah, it's interesting because I don't think that many Cavs fans even remember that era of
I think we blacked out.
that was like one half of the season, I think, because they traded for him for whatever reason. I remember Austin Carr was like super excited for Mo Spates because he was going to be an enforcer. It was a dark time. It was a dark time. We had
not to think about it.
we had no idea LeBron was coming. That was like I think that was like a year or two before LeBron eventually came. But that's it for this episode of Cavs Attack. You guys have a great day, great night, and remember, it's a long season, y'all. This ain't football. Like, the season is not close to over. We are in the first month, really, of the season. So it's going to be okay. We're going to be all right.